In recent days, the United States has sharply escalated its pressure on Venezuela, a move that many analysts say carries real risk of direct military action, even as top officials emphasize diplomacy remains on the table. At the center of this drama are two presidents, President Donald Trump of the United States and President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, and a long-standing crisis involving narcotics trafficking, regional upheaval, and a looming humanitarian fallout. From Washington, the message is increasingly urgent. The White House is laying out new options: naval deployments, airstrikes at sea, covert operations, and psychological warfare. Inside Caracas, the Maduro government is digging in, deploying militias, denouncing foreign intervention, and warning that Venezuela will not yield. And in the middle lie the Venezuelan people, already suffering from economic collapse, mass displacement, and decades of repression, now facing the possibility that their country could become the next front line of a U.S. campaign. Earlier this year, the U.S. began deploying naval assets and military resources to the southern Caribbean. These deployments, including warships and Marines, were officially justified as part of a broader campaign to cut off drug trafficking routes from Latin America into the United States. In September, the U.S. military publicly acknowledged its first airstrike on a vessel alleged to be exporting drugs to the U.S. via Venezuelan waters. In mid-November, the U.S. signaled a further shift. According to sources, the current phase of operations is no longer purely maritime interdiction, but may involve land targets inside Venezuela and covert operations aimed at undermining the Maduro regime. Simultaneously, the U.S. designated the Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization, a move that, while not automatically authorizing military invasion, provides broad legal tools and signals political intent. And yet, while pressure mounts, President Trump is also signaling he is willing to engage directly with President Maduro. He has told advisers he plans to speak with him even as the military options remain active. In Caracas, Maduro's government is responding with defiance. Officials call the U.S. designations and deployments an attempt at regime change and interference in Venezuela's sovereignty. The Foreign Ministry dismissed the Cartel de los Soles designation as a patraña, a sham meant to justify intervention. President Maduro himself declared no van apoda con Venezuela. The regime is mobilizing militias, reinforcing coastal defenses, and warning the region that any U.S. strike will provoke a broader conflict. Analysts note that Venezuela is already one of the world's largest displacement crises, with nearly 8 million Venezuelans forced from home. A further sudden collapse or military confrontation could spook the entire region. The human cost of this confrontation is scarcely visible in the corridors of power, but the signs are there. Venezuelans who fled the country during the economic crash now watch anxiously as their homeland becomes the target of new foreign maneuvers. Colombians and Brazilians are bracing for fresh migration waves if Venezuela destabilizes further. One senior U.S. official recently told reporters, "In the meantime, we're going to blow up boats shipping drugs. We're going to stop the drug trafficking." That mission fragment strike the maritime routes overlaps with the broader strategic aim, weakening the Maduro regime. And for the ordinary Venezuelan, that raises multiple fears. Will U.S. strikes hit civilian areas? Could intervention spark internal conflict among militias and military units? What happens if the government falls but no stable transition emerges? Government oversight groups warn that stabilizing a country after externally backed regime change is extremely hard and rarely straightforward. Several remarks in the original video underscore the stakes. Speaker, this is the transcript of the video. First, fetch the latest factual information. Editorial instruction removed for this script. Time's up. Real chance of U.S. striking Venezuela as Trump's serious plan is revealed. Headline-style summary. And other quotes that underline the sense of urgency. For example, "We have to act now before it's too late. There is no longer any doubt that military action is on the table," etc. Preserved verbatim in the script where they appeared. Despite the mounting signals, several key questions remain open. Will the U.S. strike on land inside Venezuela, or is the action limited to maritime interdiction? Some U.S. officials say land strikes are on the table, yet others caution they are not imminent. What is the long-term objective? The official narrative is narcotics interdiction, but many analysts contend the real goal is regime change. What will happen after any military action? The human, governance and regional consequences may prove far greater than any tactical victory. How will regional powers respond? Countries such as Brazil and Mexico are already wary of US unilateral moves and may push back if an invasion loosens Venezuelan stability. For the US, this marks one of the most aggressive foreign policy moves in Latin America in decades, mixing drug policy with military power and geopolitical ambition. The designation of the Cartel de los Soles signals a shift from sanctions, diplomacy to potential kinetic operations. For Venezuela, the regime is under pressure from two fronts: internal economic collapse and external military threat. If Maduro falls, the transition landscape appears highly unsettled. It could lead to civil war, military fracturing and mass migration. For the region, the risks are high. A disrupted Venezuela could overwhelm Colombia and Brazil with refugees, destabilize Caribbean supply routes, and prompt further power plays by China, Russia, and Iran in Latin America. For civilians inside Venezuela, the fear is acute. Decades of crisis have already battered livelihoods. Now the spectre of war looms. A misstep could send the suffering into a new dimension. Whether President Trump follows through on a planned call with President Maduro and what terms might emerge from that. Whether US forces move from maritime interdiction to terrestrial targets inside Venezuela. How Venezuela's armed forces and militia respond, whether they fracture, escalate or adapt. Any major jump in refugee flows from Venezuela into neighboring states. Diplomatic reactions across Latin America. Will Brazil, Mexico or regional blocs push back? Human rights monitoring of any US strikes concerns are already raised about unauthorized extrajudicial killings. In the clash between the world's largest democracy and a deeply embattled South American state, the margin for miscalculation is narrow. President Trump appears to believe he holds the advantage: military might, legal designations and a disruptive posture. President Maduro insists he will not yield, invoking national sovereignty, mobilizing militias and leaning on regional alliances. But the people caught in the middle, the Venezuelans grappling with food shortages, mass migration and daily survival, may bear the heaviest burden. If strike options become action steps, the consequences could ripple far beyond the Caribbean coast. The story is no longer just about drugs or regime change. It is about stability, rights and the cost of war in a region long yearning for peace. And for now, time is truly up.